The only solution here is the separation of money and state. So now, because the society is growing and the population is growing, both sides of the island elect a government. However well run the government is, inevitably it will hit a deficit at some point. Satoshi, he only has two choices here. To balance the budget, he needs to either raise taxes or cut spending. Whereas Fiatello, he has exactly the same choices, but he also has a big red button. And Fiatello knows that if he raises taxes or he cuts spending, it's going to cost him votes. So just this time, he decides to press the big red button and print a little bit of extra money for the government. He's increased the amount of money in the economy overnight, but he hasn't increased the amount of goods and services available in the economy. Since Fiatello pressed the big red button, asset prices have been going up. The stock market goes higher and higher and higher. House prices go higher and higher and higher. He thinks I'm some sort of economic genius, but they're going up in price because he's just created more Fiatellos. So anybody who knows that there are more Fiatellos in the system, of course, wouldn't sell their asset for the same as they did yesterday. But this asset increase is good for the people who own the assets, but not for the people who don't. So he has a wealth inequality begin to emerge across the economy. And not just that, because house prices are now more expensive, the rent is more expensive. So he sees increased levels of homelessness. And this increased levels of homelessness, guess what, require more government intervention to try and deal with. And now asset prices are flying, the stock market's on fire. The prevailing perception across the population is, why would I not invest? Why would I just keep the money? I should be buying the stock market, I should be invested, I should be buying a second home to rent out, I should be buying speculative assets because they never go down, they just go up. If I don't invest, I'm a fool. But now that house prices have gone up, and now that everyone has more debt, at the same time as families are struggling with affordability of day-to-day life, it's now much harder to buy a house. So families where previously they could have one main earner and afford to buy a house with a mortgage, can't anymore. You now need both parents working to afford the mortgage and afford to live. It will definitely be asset seizures. Now that all the money is held in the banks, one day Fiatello will decree, we're all in it together, and the banks will hand over a proportion of that capital. Just like in Cyprus in 2013, if you held over 100,000 euros in the bank overnight, 45% of that went to the government. The public was effectively bailed in to bail out the banks and the government from their own mismanagement. It also happened in the US in 1933. They made gold holdings for the individual illegal, and this lasted for almost 40 years. If you held more than $100 of gold and you were caught, $10,000 fine or 10 years in prison. The government never explains to the population where these problems are coming from. They don't tell them it's because of the money printing via the big red button. They control the media. The government is protective of itself. So at every step of this journey, the solution to all the problems has always been more government involvement. And so the people see these problems and vote for more government involvement to solve them. So if we go back to that list of 7 characteristics of perfect money, Fiatello only changed 2 of them. The other 5 are still exactly the same. And look where he ended up. The US dollar is just a terrible version of the Fiatello. But it's not great for merchants. You pay instantly, the merchant doesn't get the money for multiple days. And that's if there was no fraud or chargebacks. The notes are reprinted in terms of design every 15 or 20 years, so there's no ability for an individual to save outside the banking system. If you put notes under your bed or under the floorboards and leave them 25 years, they're worthless. Those types of notes have gone out of circulation. They re-centralize everything periodically. Some countries around the world have already introduced what are known as CBDCs, which are central bank digital currency, but effectively it's programmable money. A specific dollar may have an expiration date. You need to spend it before this period of time elapses or else it disappears. Or a dollar may have only specific use cases. You must spend this dollar on X or Y, or you must not spend this dollar on A, B, C. Prior to 1971, you could give your dollars back and receive gold in return. Nixon took the US off the gold standard and every currency in the world followed. And since then, it's allowed the US to print unlimited amounts of money to satisfy its own needs. So the money printer is systematically destroying the purchasing power of the dollar. I would love to be able to use the dollar, as would the vast majority of people around the world. But unfortunately, most people just aren't as lucky. This is the performance of all the other currencies versus the dollar over the last 10 years. Some have near enough disappeared completely, and some absolutely have. They've ceased to exist. Nothing stops this train. There is no way out for governments. The only solution is to keep pressing the big red button.